Welcome to Doctors at Work. My name's Matt Daniel, and this podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. Today's topic is money and the relationships that we as doctors have with money. We often don't like to talk about money, but the reality is that it matters. It matters for us personally, and it also matters in the healthcare that we deliver, now more than ever. In this episode, Hugh Massie and I discussed the role that money plays in doctors' careers. Now, doctors need to establish their identity, the legacy they want to leave, and how they want to be held to account. And money then becomes something that is part of the whole, supporting the rest of one's work rather than a source of stress and envy. Welcome, Hugh. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Matt, it's great to spend some time with you today. And just for our audience, I'm from Sydney, Australia originally. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and I suppose I got to that place because of my life passion, purpose, calling to help people all over the world become financially self-empowered. And as I work on that, and I've been working on that purpose for the last 23 or 24 years, it's come because I want to help people make more informed decisions. And I realize that is about understanding themselves, their talents, and also their financial behaviors. And they're very interrelated. And that's what I sort of try to help the world understand, that money is, and how you deal with money is really a function of who you are as a person, and who you are as a person will drive a lot of the decisions that you make. So they're inextricably tied together. Money has a very strong energy. It's always with us. It's, in a way, it's omnipresent in every thought, every action, interaction. Money is there in some way, even if we don't think it is. And I know there are lots of doctors listening today who think, okay, my life is about helping patients and helping them have a better life and be healthy. But money is wrapped up in all of that. It might have been what drove you to be a doctor. It may not be what drove you to be a doctor, but every decision you're making, money's there. And I think deep down, why is this important? Because money causes stress, and then that stress can cause health issues. And even for a doctor, you can get stressed by your work, and that will have an impact on your health. And that's something that you need to learn how to manage. And this is true for everybody. It plays into your physical health, what you eat and drink, but also your mental health. And doctors are certainly not excluded from the mental health issues that exist today and are growing. Life is high pressure. And I think this is a topic that we're all talking a lot more about. And so, my role out there in the world is really to help people address these issues, live a quality life, if you want to call it that, for longer, be happier, more successful, healthier for longer, by reducing their stress. But you've got to deal with money.
And the topic for us today then is about how we as doctors, physicians, how we can have a good relationship with money. And for me, it's interesting that we're talking about this, because maybe 5 years ago, I would never have done a podcast where I would talk about money 5 years ago. Because, if you'd asked me 5 years ago, what do I think about money is I do this to help patients, and, and I'm here, and hopefully I'll earn a decent salary, and I'll have enough money, and I'll have a pension. I don't need to worry about that. And money was kind of irrelevant, because principally sort of I'm here because I want to help patients. And what for me has been interesting is that certainly maybe in my mind, there's been a big realization about how I've been missing a trick for a lot of my life when I completely ignored anything financial. And certainly how I see that playing out at the moment is that I know that in UK, lots of doctors are struggling financially. The people that are the generation behind me, they haven't got the kind of houses that I have. They're not driving the kind of cars that I used to have. They don't live in the part of town that I can afford to live in. They graduate with enormous amounts of debt. You know, in the US, sort of where you are, likewise, you know, you're going to know that, you know, people graduate with enormous debts, and, you know, whether you like it or not, they've got to think about money from the day one they graduate. And it kind of feels like the sort of a kind of an elephant in the room that, you know, we of course we're here for the patients, but the reality is, if I can't eat healthy food, if I can't have a healthy lifestyle, if I can't provide for my family, I'm not going to be able to be a good doctor. And is that just me that's kind of changed that relationship, or is that sort of something that's gradually happening in the world, where people are conscious that actually money really is more important than people think it is?
I think Matt, it's this is an emerging discussion. And the fact that there's people like you know, from not within the financial services profession, starting to talk this way and promote that concept, that's what's going to bring this more and more to the fore. Certainly when I started this journey 23 years ago in Sydney, Australia, this was not a topic that people were used to having. And I think historically, the discussion around money has been a taboo subject for many people, you know, whether it's within families, for people's careers. You know, I think that there are people I know who are doctors, and I try not to use their names, but that they probably went to that place because they saw money as a sort of as a foreign object, something that was dirty, grubby. I don't want to be involved with that, without understanding that money has got many more dimensions to it that's impacting every aspect of their life. As you alluded to, just a simple decision to decide to be a doctor and spend 10 to 12 years in training, the financial commitments of it, the debt that you end up with, and, you know, which university or colleges do you go to, where have you got to live? You know, the cost is huge relative to potentially what you're going to make and where you might end up living. You know, if you've been gone to medical school in, you know, gone to a nice school in Oxford in England, that doesn't mean that you're going to get into, you know, Oxford University, working, you know, at a top-end hospital in London, earning £1 million a year. You could be living in the back blocks of Newcastle, or somewhere in the country, but you're laden with the debt. And these are all choices. Now, others will say as well, you know what, I don't want to work in London and live in London, and I'd love to be a country doctor because I can have a great lifestyle for my kids. But that is a financial decision and a life decision. But that's where I think what we're saying is people have got to get their relationship to money right, which is getting their relationship with themselves right and their identity right. And you've got to be comfortable with all of that, because that's the personal alignment that I'm really trying to help people get to, because without that, you're going to have a lot of stress. If you are not personally aligned with who you are, you're going to have a lot of stress. And there's nothing wrong with being a doctor because you want to serve patients and help people. It doesn't mean you have to go and be the top-end surgeon at the best hospital in London to have been very successful and impactful. And there are lots of ways to practice medicine, I think, as well. You know, I think that's the other thing. Not everybody has to be an orthopedic surgeon or a brain surgeon. There are lots of different areas and ways to do this. But we can get trapped by the stigma of what we think having to be a doctor is, or what our parents told us to do, what you've seen others go and do, and not realizing that, you know, being a doctor, in a way, in many ways, you're in the people business. It doesn't matter what tools and technology you're using, it's a people's game.
if you think how do people develop a relationship with money? I told you that my relationship would have been, oh, I don't have anything with money. It's all
Yeah.
dirty stuff. It's nothing to do with me. I'm here to serve my patients. That's what I want to do. Like I don't want to talk about money. Like where do those kind of beliefs and relationships come from?
Yeah, I think this is the really big question, and the discussion of that does not start off, well, what does money mean to you? As soon as that question comes up, which often that's a mistake of a lot of financial planners, and even in family conversations. Okay, what does money mean to you? Why do you want it? Why is it important? As soon as that comes up, all the fears, taboos, the judgment about money, people start reconciling, well, how much money have I got or going to have is a measurement of my success. Uh, the sort of the dirty feeling about money, the shames, that all comes up right there. And you're never going to get to the real place. And if people are going to have a healthy relationship to money, it's what I was alluding to before, they've got to have a healthy relationship to themselves. And where I bring people to on this is, what is your identity?
Can you tell me a bit more about
Yeah,
what?
so your identity is a reflection of uh, your calling in life, your X factor. What is the one thing you can do out there in the world that you'd be the greatest at? And that isn't switching on X-ray machines and necessarily putting tools in your hands and opening somebody up. That X factor could be something far deeper than that and much more unique. But the identity is then also, how do you want the world to see you? And how do you want to project yourself into the world, and how you're going to hold yourself accountable? So this is this sort of highest level of being. And it is somewhat evolutionary. And so, in your 20s, your identity may not be the same as what it is in your late 30s or in your mid 40s, where it evolves more.
Mhm.
And it's never too late for anybody who's listening to this today to find what your identity is and start to make life shifts towards that. But it is and in a sense, is like my life started as an accountant. I was a tax specialist. I was really good at it, but in fact, it was really only an 8 out of 10 skill as far as I was concerned. For me, even though I may have been better than a lot of people at it, at tax law and accounting and those types of things, it was only an 8 out of 10 sort of level for me. And I think that's the same for doctors. A lot of doctors could be good at opening up people, but there's something more special. And so an accountant, it's sort of like it's part of you as a human doing. It's what you do. It's not you as a human being. And for me, I've got more of my identity today is much more around being a behavioral solutions architect. Now, all of my financial training is all used in that, but I'm able to weld together behavioral solutions and financial solutions together to get people to, and businesses, to a new place to unlock themselves for quantum leap growth. That's taken some evolutions for me. Investing in other businesses, being an entrepreneurial business founder, a leader of companies, whatever. But I've got to that place. But I think that what I try to do is get people to look a lot within, look at their journey, and unpack it more, and then get them to see, where do they want to be, and how do you want to show up in the world, be held accountable. And then the measurement part, and I think this is where people get confused. The measurement part is, whether Hugh Massie is successful, or I've got a younger brother, John, who's a doctor, actually a respiratory pediatrician. It is not about how much money one makes. It's a bit, I get people to measure their success by what their human impact is. Like, your human impact is huge. It's not just how many patients you see. It's the number of people perhaps that you've got, Matt, listening to your podcast all over the world. The fact that there might be somebody in Turkey today or in Cairo listening to this and getting impacted in some way, then haven't we done a good thing if we get them to change their mindset in some way? That's a shift. That's part of your success and legacy, because money comes and goes. You can make quite a lot, and I know there's surgeons out there, big in the room guys, making £1 million a year, they're in London, but they're spending it on, high-end Mercedes-Benz, second home that they don't really need. Kids are in expensive schools, and bet you there's no savings. Then they get angry, right? Upset. Okay, the investment banker down the street, he's making more than me, so I'm not as good as him. I need to do something to make more money. Well, that can lead to a bad decision. And then you've got the wife at home who's got these expectations because while he's at work, she's been encouraged to, allowed to live this life. And this is not just for men. This can be women too. This is all the same thing. And there are plenty of doctors out there earning $1 million a year or £1 million a year. No savings. And then there's a train wreck sitting behind it of divorce, kids that don't want to communicate with them, feel unappreciated, even though they've had everything in the world. That is the place with money you don't want to be in. But if you get your identity right and where you want to be in the world, and then you build the relationships around you for that, then it becomes life becomes very different, probably less stressful, and you can still impact lots of people. You can be a doctor living in, as I said, in Newcastle, England, or Yorkshire, and still impacting millions of people a year. If you think out of the box a little bit, like what you've been doing, right? And I think that's where I'm trying to help people with this. But money it plays a central game in it. And you cannot, as a doctor, ignore the role of money.
I hope you're enjoying the show. Please click subscribe so you'll be notified when new episodes become available. This podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. You can be part of that mission too by forwarding this show to one person who you think might benefit from listening. Thank you. Now on with the show. It's interesting if I kind of think some of the people that I've known, in terms of careers. I'll give you some examples, and then sort of maybe you can try and unpick some of the types of people that I've described. So maybe in UK at the moment that there are lots of doctors early in their career who don't earn very much money, and they're all saying I could go into consulting and I could earn £100,000 a year going into consulting, and
Yeah.
there's very much there's a kind of pervasive thing. Well, I've worked so hard, I've been doing this for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and I'm not earning very much money. I mean, eventually they might, yeah, but right now I'm not earning very much money. But I could go into consulting and I could earn 100 grand a year. So that's kind of one of the stories. I have to say, I wonder how many people actually earn that amount of money in consulting for the long term. Certainly, as a medical doctor, you can earn that amount of money year after year after year. I'm not sure about consulting. But there's an early career person who doesn't earn very much, who's sitting there feeling resentful because they're not earning 100 grand a year, same as they might in consulting. The other kind of person that also I have in mind is I have somebody who's let's talk about a 40-year-old who's fully qualified, that's got an internal conversation saying, okay, I want to do X, I want to develop, I want to learn, I want to paint, I want to do pottery, I want to spend time with my children, my dogs, my family, I want to exercise, whatever it is, but I also need the money, and I need the money, therefore I can't afford to do all of I can't do all of these things because I have to earn the money. So maybe we kind of have that kind of person in the middle, and then maybe the third person, if I give again somebody senior who has got a big mortgage, a house in the posh part of town, children at private school, whether they've got another half at home, irrelevant, but people thinking I've got to do all this private practice, I've got to think how can I earn more money in order to support this amazing lifestyle that everybody else is highly envious of. But as you say, thinking, okay, I need more money, I need more money, I need more money. So how would you kind of analyze those three types of thoughts, identities, behaviors?
Yeah, I think that the first one is an interesting one, and I think the first thing is probably taking the mental step or the mental shift, and I sort of look at this as what I call quantum leap type thinking, is, are you prepared to say, okay, I've been, like, in a way, I was trained as an accountant. I spent 10 years becoming a high-end tech specialist, but I walked away from it to do something that I really wanted to, loved to do. And I moved to, another area in financial services before I started the human behavior business. So today I'm a reformed accountant. Well, why not be a reformed doctor? But there's plenty of consulting work, in whether they're in the bigger consulting firms or mid-sized consulting firms, that probably would value the thinking and the perspectives that a doctor has that he or she could bring to the table. Or even working inside a law firm, not as a lawyer, but to help the litigators or to help, trademarks, cases and whatnot, because you understand medicine and the issues. Or you could be a expert witness in cases. I think there's plenty of areas when you start to think outside the box, what you could do. You could work with, as a biochemist or as a functional medicine doctor. Now it's becoming much more of a thing, so I think there's many areas that doctors can push themselves out to, and it doesn't have to be an overnight thing. For me, it was a little bit overnight, but that was for a whole lot of reasons, other reasons. But it can be a progressive journey to this, and it's a matter of changing your mindset. And when you change your mindset, then the people that you start to meet somehow become different, and you look at them in a different way, and opportunity knocks. It's under your nose. And so I think that there's plenty of space for doctors to make these types of moves. And frankly, with artificial intelligence the way it is today, technology shifting workforces in every area, lots of them are going to have to do this. But I think it's just making a decision that the training I had, for whether it was for 6 years or 8 years for the first level or to then become a specialist, that's just a stepping stone in my life.
I'm wondering, Hugh, sort of this idea that they're chasing money because they're not chasing the career. They're doing it for the money.
Well, I think the first thing is you've got to decide, do you love medicine for what medicine is and the area of practice you're in? And that's a non-negotiable for you. If that's a non-negotiable, then you've got to find the best environment to serve in as a doctor. But if you don't really love serving the patients and that experience and serving as a doctor as such, that doesn't mean your whole life is a waste. There are a whole lot of areas you can step into. I think that's the key thing, and that's part of the identity conversation, is really getting down to what's the part that you really love. And there may be a whole lot of different ways to serve patients than being in a hospital or working at in some sort of community practice.
So does
that you need to unravel.
So does my identity as a doctor versus my identity as doing something else? And I guess, one of the challenges, I think, also, again, if I think somebody early on in their career, is that people often want to make a big difference on a world scale, sort of. And the challenge that people face is that the traditional medical pathways, I make a difference to you sat in front of me, largely that's traditional medicine, isn't it? I make a difference to you who is sort of sat in front of me. And I know that sort of lots of people, I guess including me, sort of kind of think, well, okay, well, that's very well, but that's not enough. I want to make a difference to you sat in front of me, but I also want to make a difference sort of, to people elsewhere. And I guess sort of some of those alternate ways of thinking, and then sort of changing your identity, that can be a way that one can serve patients, but on a global, bigger scale than just the one person sat in front of you.
Right. And so with the world that's being digital today, you can do that in sort of like, in a way, this is a digital format that we're doing now. Clearly through research papers, that's another way to do it. But you could develop a product, right? And, it doesn't mean that you're not working maybe in a patient, working in a practice with patients a few days a week, but on the side, you're working with some other guys in developing a product, in an input to a product. I've got a friend at the moment that, I've been, and I did a podcast with him recently, that he and a few physicians have got together to develop an alternative way to deliver medicine and functional medicine. And that will become its own business, and that's through the use of devices, supplements, how people get served with telehealth, the whole game. You can interface it to insurance companies. So there's, if you're prepared to think out of the box, you can do it. But again, it doesn't have to all happen overnight. You can make it a progressive journey. And I think that also plays to the second situation you talked about. Like, I had a friend, just as is the story, she was a high-end business consultant trainer earning quite a lot of money, but she wasn't really passionate about that. She was passionate about music. And I said to her, Ellie, why don't you, every time you do a training workshop or a consulting program, have a rendition done on the piano where you can do that part? So she learned to bring that into her work. And now the passion's fulfilled. It doesn't mean, I wasn't, we weren't necessarily talking about, well, switch out of being a consultant and now go and be a musician on stage earning your money that way. But that can be a pathway to it. But I don't think if you've got a passion that's in another area of your life that it has to be ignored. I think it's a way of work. You can be creative in your thinking, and maybe this is where coaching helps to bring them together. But that fuels her life. She doesn't have to ignore music, right? And I think that's the same as a doctor. If you enjoy art, my sister-in-law is also a doctor, married to my brother, who's a doctor. They're both pediatricians, but she's an artist and she does plenty of artwork. You don't have to ignore, again, you don't have to ignore that side of your life, I think, but you've got to create the space to do it. But it comes down to what's your identity, what is important, and how you make all those things work together.
And that sounds like
something always has to give way somewhere, in this. And then money is a conversation. But if you don't figure out the things that are important first, and your identity, some of your goals, then that's, and you let money get in the way, you will never get to those goals. You never get to that place of identity.
And with the third person, certainly, if we use that analogy, money is very much in the way, because all the time they're chasing money to have this amazing lifestyle and
out of the three situations, that's the most miserable one. It looks glamorous, but is it really? And do you want to wake up at 58 years old or 60 years old as having been a high flying surgeon, a couple of divorces to your name, or you suddenly realize your wife's even walking out on you then, and having, kids that don't want to talk to you. You spent all the money for what, right? And it's been stressful. And then you look around at others, well, gee, they've all made more than me. Whereas really what they've done is, from a medical perspective, had a great career and helped a lot of people. But their whole mindset about money and why they've been doing it all has been wrong. It's been upside down. So now, not everybody who's a successful surgeon or doctor is like that, but there are a lot, and the same with dentists.
Well, certainly, I know people like that, Hugh. So that's why I brought that as a stereotype.
Because the stress of money, and I think you're sort of alluding to this, but let's put another elephant in the room. The stress of money doesn't come just from having a shortage of it. Stress of money can come from having a lot of it and creating a lot of it. And having a lot of it can impact your relationships. It's in your thoughts. Okay, how much, how is it being used within my family, educating kids, these people are in the community are wanting me to make donations. It's endless, and I'm spending money on boats and cars and toys. And then the other end, the people who haven't got as much, okay, I need a bit more so I can have that once in a lifetime family vacation, whatnot. But, in the United States, there's sort of what's called the World Happiness Report. And there's an organization around it. But somewhere in the United States, it's about $125,000 is the happiness line with money. So it's a lot less than you think. But let's say you even double that number to $250,000. Well, that's not out of range for highly skilled people to earn. from a number of income streams, or being the consultant that you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
That's very possible.
The other thing, that for me is interesting as we're talking about money is I've gotten much wiser again, probably only over the last 5 years or so, is about the role of money in my clinical practice and the care that my patients receive. Because historically, I would have said this mysteriously stuff just gets paid for. I'm talking about UK practice. Yeah, I mean, maybe
Yeah.
people in the US or Australia will have known about this for a long time. Whereas for me in UK, it would have been, well, people come in and stuff just gets paid, and people get treated, at some stage, maybe not very, very quickly. Whereas what's happened now is we perhaps in UK are moving much closer to maybe where the rest of the world already is, which is a real understanding of, okay, what can we afford to do? You can't have your tonsils taken out for this indication anymore, and you can get your surgery, but only if you meet criteria X, Y, and Z. And potentially, in UK, a lot of doctors have been replaced with non-doctor roles. So patients are no longer seeing doctors, and some of that may be good, some of that may be bad. And also, I quite foresee something happening where as a society we're just going to say, well, we're just not paying for this anymore because we can't afford it. There'll be whole range of conditions, procedures, treatments that we're going to say, no, you only get this if you pay for it out of your own pocket. And I've kind of become much better aware that actually money is really important when it comes to the care that my patients get. And that means that I need to understand, because if I want to be an advocate for my patients, I need to understand where that money comes from, and I need to push for that money, and I need to make a case for the money that pays for the care that my patients receive.
Yeah, I think that's right. But I think what we're talking about is an effective use of money, aren't we? So what care do they get? Do they need to have this particular line of care, or can the same goal be achieved this way? Does someone need to take tablets, or do they just need to make lifestyle changes? And I think that once upon a time it'd be easier just to say take a pill. But is it actually, we've got to sort of deal with fundamental cause issues? Is it the food that you're eating, the exercise you're taking? And I think that if people then have got to be accountable for the money, whether it's as the service provider or the patient paying for it, then in a way, sometimes a shortage of money gets us back to making what are fundamentally better decisions. Whereas when there's too much, when money is easy, it can either be claimed on an insurance company, or the person's just got a lot of it. Then you just do what's easiest. Whereas I think what we're talking about now is being much more careful and considered in that, right? And in a way, you want to make, still as a doctor, you still want to make more money, but that means your time's got to be well used. People have got to be able to pay for the solutions that you come up with. But I think that we can have these discussions in a way, Matt, that it's more effective, if that makes sense.
So it's less about, as doctors, we can prescribe opiates, we can prescribe anti-reflux treatments, we can prescribe weight loss injections, we can prescribe, type 2 diabetes treatment, we can prescribe antidepressants, and, lots and lots of that happens, and lots of that costs lots of money.
Yeah.
Both doctors and healthcare systems and pharma companies, etc., make a lot of money, but a lot of that actually, what you're saying is much more important, that we go back to the beginning and sort of say, okay, why are people stressed? Why are people depressed? Why are people overweight? Why are they not exercising? Why are they not eating healthily? And actually, money would be much better spent at the start of that pathway rather than at the end, when they come to us looking for us to fix what is the end.
Right, because it's all an investment. And where are you going to make the investment? And it might be a cheaper investment to invest in a little bit more time going for walks, eating better food, cutting out alcohol. I mean, if you extrapolate the costs of all that, not eat out at restaurants as much, just do things differently, there comes a whole lot of savings financially, but also you get better health. And I think that's just sort of standing back and looking at, where's the money going and what is it getting me and what is the side effect of what I'm doing. And it might well be that people taking injections has got a whole lot of financial side effects, but they've also got medical side effects. And I think that's all got to be looked at. Now, there are cases where people, I don't think I want to be on record as saying, that there are clearly cases where people need to be having the injection or the tablet or whatever it is, the opioid. There are clear cases for that. But maybe less people need to be dependent on it.
It's perhaps for me, what role do we as doctors play in public health advocacy? Yeah, sort of, what role do we play to treat the individual in front of us, and that's important. But also, what role do we play in public health societal advocacy, which is also important.
Well, I think it's a little bit like, I'll use a brain surgery example. A brain surgeon can go inside a patient's head and take out a tumor and walk out and say, I got the tumor out. But what was the collateral damage? And the brain tumor will run around saying, the brain surgeon will run around and say, I did a good job. But actual fact, have they solved the problem? No, they might have created another one. And I think this is why we've got to take, all of us have got to more collectively take a holistic view of all this and have the courage to do it. And that might be for, even for you and your practice, Matt, saying, you know what, for certain types of patients, I'm either not going to take them on and they need to go somewhere else, or this is the way they get served. And this is how I'm going to serve as their public advocate. And that might be part of what your identity becomes. And here are the rules of engagement. Now, while you don't want to play their financial planner, you might say, well, I want you to consider all of this before we go down this track, and to speak to another person. And that's whether the patient is, your sort of clinical patient, or we're talking about other doctors and helping them think this way too.
Let's bring us back sort of to doctors themselves and their relationship with money. We talked a lot about, sort of making choices and identity and decision. I mean, how does one figure out what one's identity is? How does one go about deciding what kind of relationship one has with money?
Well, so, if I'm following the DNA behavior methodologies, and people can see this at our website at dnabehavior.com, is the first thing is to become aware of yourself, what your talents are. I look at people's natural hardwired talents that have been there from early in life, what their life patterns have been, in sort of the life journey, and work people through some, so they do that exercise. It's a psychometric exercise. We understand, so it's scientifically based, it's very robust, and then take people through a series of exercises to unpack the identity.
Yeah.
And then once we know the identity, then is what's your real life goal in terms of, if you want to call it moonshot goal, in terms of how you're going to have life impact and what the measurable of that is, not a dollar sign behind that, more of a human impact measurement. And then everything else will flow from there. If you get that right, maybe you've got to have a conversation with your spouse or partner as well, and your family. Get that right, and then the rest will happen.
So it's basically getting to know yourself, something about self-discovery, what you enjoy, what you're good at, where your strengths are, what have you learned, coupled with...
And how you want to be held accountable in the world, how you want the world to see you, like for you saying, I want to be a public advocate for people. That's starting to get closer to your identity, rather than saying I'm a clinical psychologist. That's what I'm trying to get people for, because you see, public advocate is more emotional.
Yeah.
Right? More part of your emotional being.
Yeah. Okay. I'll bring us to a close, Hugh, and maybe could ask you to summarize, based on what we've discussed, what would be your top tips for doctors at work when it comes to their relationships with money?
Well, I think what I would say is always live in alignment with yourself, and be true to yourself, and and then create a life that has less stress in it, and where you can be happier and successful and healthier for longer. And that's really then getting down to, okay, what role is money going to play in your life? And let it be the fuel for success and happiness and health, and not a detractor of it.
That's a great message. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.